And let's have a look at Visage itself. Basically, I just have two icons here on the desktop. To set the icon up, which is something you may want to do, for your clients, basically, has a whole lot of stuff in front: C, Windows, System32, MSHTA. When you're actually setting this up, all you need to worry about is putting in MSHTA. And following that is the web address. Now these are broken up. The first bit here is a thing called the actual website. So we have a thing called SmartSafe / web links, which is our directory for linking things into the internet generally. Templates, which is just template directories, pages if you will. And then this thing called Visage101. So the HTA extension is important there because it identifies it to the environment as being a hypertext application. A question mark and vconfig. And the vconfig basically means that we'll get into the configuration process. This is something that most people would not have on their desktop. You can run it from any desktop, but certainly you wouldn't put it on an end user's desktop. It'll come up and ask for a password. And I just want to make sure I did really start recording this. Yes, we did. Good. That's fine. It'll ask for a password. When you actually install Visage, you get to nominate a password that will be used for this management console. So, usual things, you don't get to see what the actual password is. Click log on and we'll be into the main menu itself. From the management console, this is where you set up what we call template servers. They're really the web servers, or it's really a web server which can service multiple sites and so forth. So at the moment we have quite a few websites running off here. If we have a look at the one that we're actually using, which is this SmartSafe website, so that each of these simply has a name, an address. This is just an IP address. Physically, whereabouts the templates are actually stored. These are the web pages. So these web pages are stored out in that particular location. Whereabouts the scripts are. The scripts in this case, remember I said that there was a thing called an ISAPI, a DLL that runs in Windows. This is basically where this is. Now all these things are the default for you in terms of the script directory and so forth. When you first install Visage, you need to have a web server physically installed, but we'll take care of all the configuration of IIS and so forth for you. Right? So you just say, I want a new website, this is what it's called, the address is going to be the same as the last address, or it might be tied to a particular external IP or whatever, and yeah, you'll just go and build that stuff in IIS itself, so you don't need to worry about that, though it is useful to actually know how that particular snap-in for IIS goes. Virtual directory name, if there are specific passwords and usernames you need to go and access that particular template directory and so forth, plug those in, and if we're creating sites, whether it's going to be created as a virtual directory or site, you would always just use site. This is also where you can say whether you're going to use Windows authentication. If you've ever been to a website and it's come up and sort of asked you in a Windows box for a username and password and so forth, if you wanted that capability, you just check this Windows authentication box and then someone has to give you credentials off that particular Windows machine. But Visage has its own security system as well. You can use them both, you can use them separately, doesn't really matter. There are some specific settings that you can put in terms of IIS. We talked about caching before in terms of when you go and visit a website, if caching is enabled, some things about that particular visit will be kept on your computer locally, on your workstation, so if you come back and visit that website, they will come back very quickly. Some of those things are nasty little buggers like cookies and so on, but others are just whole web pages and so on. So here we're running a thing called full caching, so it means that every image that we have, every script, every menu, every piece of XML, every style sheet, every template or web page will actually be cached. So that means first time you visit somewhere, there's a bit of a hit because it has to be loaded. Next time you visit it, it's going to be less of a hit because we already have that cached. There are things in place that will also check if you've changed the page or something similar, and if it needs to refresh it, it will actually take care of that for you. So it just gives you that little bit of a boost. There are things called DSOs. These are data source objects. Basically, when we communicate and transfer information around, we can either hook in via Windows or file polling. If your data, when we're interacting with a website, is stored on a physical Windows machine, you would use Windows events. Windows is very good. You can hook events in that say when a file change or there's a new file in this directory, run this program. If that particular stuff is running off a Linux machine or a Windows machine or something similar, you can't do that. So we have to go and poll that directory. And if we set this up for file polling, that's when that polling thing here. So every 100 milliseconds we'll go and see if we have the information that we needed. So we wait for 10 milliseconds, go see if it's there, and if we don't find any information in 90 seconds, or you can figure this, a minute and a half, we know that something serious has happened. We also have a thing called HTTP acceleration. Okay, what does that mean? Normally your bulk variety IIS type stuff, when you load it up straight out of the box, install it from Windows, because it's a free component of Windows, will allow each client machine to have at most 2 connections to it concurrently. So if you will, if you've got a web page, if you've ever been on a website and you see, it's got 8 more items to download, and you've often wondered, why is this taking so long? And each one is being loaded individually, and you can see it's got 6 to go, it's got 5 to go, it's got 4 to go. The reason for that is because IIS and other web servers limit the number of concurrent connections from a single machine. Obviously, if they allowed more, then if they were getting scammed or hit with an attack or something, it would have a bigger impact. Here, because we're talking internally, we might want to boost that up. Now, there are basically 3 settings to this. No acceleration, 2. Small, 4. Moderate, 8. Maximum, 16. Right, concurrent connections. Now, your limitation isn't, turning something up to 16 isn't necessarily going to make it run 16 times faster, because there's still back-end work that needs to be done, and you still also have the physical limitation of whatever the bandwidth is going into the machine and the connection and so on. But it does enable you to maximise your responsiveness if you want. Right, so it's a hidden setting somewhere in the bowels of IIS, and you can probably talk to someone who is a Microsoft MSc, a Microsoft Certified Engineer, and they may not know that. It's one of those little hidden secret type things that's buried away. So generally, I would myself just set that to maximum as a matter of course. It means that the first time someone visits your site, it will come and say, hey, I've detected a change in acceleration, and it will just stop and restart and away you go. So it's a bit of a shudder, but it just means that if you've got multiple images and so forth coming out, because if you have a look, you've got potentially buttons and so on coming through, and it just means that those things can all be loading simultaneously, especially if they're cached, because they're not actually loading. It just means that, so it does give you that, it's sort of a Clayton's performance boost, but it is really a real performance boost. Anyway, so you set up your template servers. The other thing that's important in this equation is the actual data servers themselves, right? So this is the connections into the database. So physically a name, once more, what their IP address is, what template server they're associated with. We have connections into the database, and normally it's a one-for-one correspondence. We have a particular website which is going to use those particular connections in terms of a pool. It can also have associated with it mail servers, fax servers, report servers, and bit servers. Mail server, to be able to send mail. Fax server, to be able to send faxes. Report server, to be able to produce reports. And the Visage Reporter is a server-based product, and it allows you to design a report, and that report can be sent to a fax. It can be sent all multiple faxes simultaneously. Because if you're running it off a server machine, you can actually have up to 254 fax modems stuck in the thing. You can send it out via email. If you send it via email, it can be as a HTML email, or it can be as an attached PDF or something similar. The report server also allows you to produce those reports as files, so you can produce a thing as a PDF or as a TIFF or as a JPEG, probably not a JPEG, but an Excel spreadsheet or a HTML document and so forth. Heck, the report server is so advanced you can even print it out to a printer if you want. And it can be any printer that's supported by Windows, so even the old cheapy type things, because the entire print environment is totally Windows based. And then we also have the thing called the bit server, which is a data warehouse. So that's where information on steroids. If you equip your users with a bit cube, they will probably never use the report server for anything more than producing invoices and orders and so forth, because all of their other information needs become self-service out of the bit cube, because they can basically sit there with something that looks like Excel on steroids, and it's basically an answer waiting for a question in terms of what it does. And we'll have a look at that later on. Oh, sorry, the other thing that you have in terms of these data servers, if I have a look at that one, is also just the logon scripts and so forth that you actually use. So in terms of logging on, it's basically here's a response that it gets from the machine. In this case it's our internal Linux machine, so it says log in. We respond with that, and it will physically log us into D3 and do a whole lot of other things. But it could be that simply logs you into Linux first, and then you issue your D3 command, and then you log into D3. So if you will, this is something coming from the computer, and this is a response that if you were logging in with a terminal emulator, this is what you would type to get into the particular thing. And if it was an SSH connection, you'd put your SSH password and so forth before it establishes that way. So I access that just from this logon scripts button here. Okay. The other two, look, fax servers, I'll just touch very briefly. Basically, once more, a name, an address, and how many worker threads there are. So in other words, how many, in this case we're talking faxes, so how many fax requests do we want it to be able to service simultaneously? Right, one in this case, because we don't want our machine to be overworked. And also, we only have one fax modem. So having that is normally going to correspond pretty well exactly to the number of fax modems you have on the machine. The fax service doesn't have to run on the same machine as your database is running. It doesn't have to run on the same machine that your Visage web service is running on. It could be running off another machine somewhere else. Same sort of thing for the mail server type stuff as well. Right, where the mail server will go out and send stuff out via email. You need to have here a transport server, that's your SMTP server that you're actually going to be using, and a username and password to physically get into that particular machine. You can also have things going through as just a straight POP3 type connection coming in. We'll talk you through that if you need to set these sorts of things up. And bit servers we won't worry about. Report servers, once more, very simple. The important thing here, apart from the name and how many worker threads, in other words, how many reports it can be producing simultaneously, is physically whereabouts it's going to find its data. Right? So we would physically write information out to that particular directory. You don't have to write it. The fact that it takes care of all that. It's just this is set up so it knows where to find it, because it may or may not be on the same machine. And you may recall, well, we have the data service and so forth. These things all get brought together by connections. Connections is where we tie together a data server, a license type, separate discussion, I'm not going to bog you down, but basically we have two different types of licenses, traditional per seat licensing, which we call a runtime or an enterprise license, and also a portal license, where we don't care how many users there are, but we care how many connections in the database. In terms of your error handling, normally you would have this set up for auto restart. If you're in an internal development environment, if you have the connections, you can also set it up for debug, which means that, before I said that if a program came out to a star or something similar, you could actually call up a window that allows you to interact with the pick basic debugger out the back end. To be able to do that, you need to have that debug thing set here, because by default, you may also recall I said the environment was self-healing. If it detected that, it would automatically restart, providing you tell it to. Otherwise, it will just go to the debug type scenario. Each of these things can have a number of websites physically associated with it. So this is a physical internal URL, a website, the application that's running, the language we're using. We only use English here, but the environment is multilingual, so you can support even your oddball multi-byte languages and so forth through Asia. Sorry, not oddball. Mailboxes associated with these as well. If you have the mail server in place, you can have things when people lodge, if they do get an error of something, like if you have a program running out in the field and it's bombed out with something, they get a message and someone up on the screen, like one thing you can do is get them to do a screen capture and send that through to you. But if they have the mail server in place, you can also, they have a little button that says submit, and it will submit full details of the program that's running, some internal Visage stuff and so forth, and it just makes that remote debugging and so forth so much easier. So yeah, you set that sort of stuff up. But if we have a look at Smart Safe, if we have a look at instances, the instances are where the actual connections into the database themselves are. So at the moment we have 4 instances in there. Now you'll see that one of these is much higher than the others, right? 11,000 hits, and that's been, if we click on the things, that's been logged in since 6th of the 3rd, so that was last week sometime. Next one down, 1,600, so about 10% of what it is. Next one down, about 10% as well, 189. Fourth one down to 23. So that's the sort of distribution that I would expect and want to see in terms of a well-sized environment. So I've got that numbers coming down. So, and we don't know if people have actually got that resubmit type thing again. If they have, at most 23 times in the last 4 or 5 days, whatever. Ideally, you'd want to have one for a production environment that had next to nothing on it, but no, that's fine for our stuff here. So basically, what we do is we keep track of timeouts if we don't get a response back. In this case, by up to 2 minutes. And that's for your, hey, I'm doing a half-hour select type thing, so you'd have that cranked right up. If you want to get a response back, typically in under 5 seconds, then you set it to 5 seconds. Whatever is a reasonable time for the worst thing that someone could actually do. Because if we don't get a response back in that period of time, we'll actually disconnect and reconnect all over again and give the person a message back saying, hey, we tried to talk to the database, we sent a message and it wouldn't talk to us. Could be a problem you need to check out.
Just ask you,
sure.
Thread ID.
You don't need to worry about
Okay.
it. What the thread ID actually is if we have a look at Task Manager under Windows. Alright, and if we changed our view in here in terms of selected columns and so forth, it's actually an internal Windows number, so to speak, for the unique process that's running or servicing that particular line.
Volume.
Pardon?
Just the size of the different variable numbers. I just like,
the thread ID doesn't relate to the actual hit count or anything similar. It's just as we start a process up, it's given an identifier, just like a telnet session coming in, and you get a random number. So it's not random, but it's not significant unless you're actually doing some tracking about what's physically taking place on a particular process.
Can you see what the messages are, the latest messages?
Sure can. The events button up here, if we want to have a look, not at the busy ones, but if we wanted to have a look at the events that have taken place for this one that was fairly light, here are the last things that physically came through. They have all been today, which is good. So these are the physical, if we click on each of these with the red underscore type stuff, this is the information that's actually getting transferred backwards and forwards and so forth. So we keep track of the last 20 messages that have gone through a particular line, so you can track that sort of stuff. If you need to. By and large, you don't have to. But still useful to know that it's actually there. And in order to get that, you would need to allow monitoring, yes, when you actually start these lines. Now to start a new line, if I wanted to get a brand new one, I would simply say new, timeout, 120 sounds reasonable because that's what the others were, 23. We want it to actually start the logon script. There could be multiple scripts in terms of how the things actually log on to the database. I've only got one because everyone actually comes in on one random telnet port. Some people have nailed telnet ports, so the things are coming in to specific lines for specific purposes. We want to allow monitoring, we want to hook via telnet, and that's basically it. So we just say save, it will log out, which is not exactly what I expected it to do, what I wanted it to do, especially as this was on the main server as well. Basically when you save it, it will just go and add another line into that configuration screen. It will start the thing up. If it starts up okay, it'll just have the green started. If it has an error of some description, it'll come up and say error with an underscore. Click the underscore and it'll actually show you the telnet conversation. There's the line actually started. So I'll show you the telnet conversation that's actually taken place, and normally by looking at that you can see that, oh right, I mistyped that, or I forgot to do this, or something similar. Stop, it's just a case of clicking the stop button, and if you want to physically delete a line, because I really don't want to allocate that, highlight it by clicking on the red underscore thing and just hit delete. If you use the save multiple button rather than the save when you go and allocate a line, it'll say how many, because in this case you don't want to go in and have 4 or 5 or 20 lines, or well, you can type it if you want, but far easier just to say save multiple. It says how many do you want? 5, and I'll just go and create all 5 identical for you. But yeah, this is your monitoring tool. Remember this was on the second page, so from the main Visage console screen, our connections, and we went in and had a look at the physical instances, and that shows us, the most important column here is our hit count, right, because that shows us how these things are actually progressing, and this is following what I would expect. One or more fairly high, but I've got some that are very low compared to the very high, so it looks about right. There are some other things just in terms of licenses. So here's the licenses that are on this particular machine. If you need to increase licenses and so forth, just fax or an email through to us. We issue it, the activation and so forth. It's all web-based, so you just click it from here, go and activate the license. If you can't get through to the web for some reason, you can get this license ID and shoot that through to us, and we will send you back the activation code. If we just say that we want to do an activation here, there's a code, I understand why for that one, and it will go out and physically get the stuff for you and just bring those additional users and so forth back on for you. So nice and easy. And there's also the configuration thing, which is where you go and set things up like passwords and telnet retries. So if we fail to log on for some reason, because this is going to start up as soon as Windows starts, or a D3 machine or Universe machine, whatever, may not have started yet, so how long does it wait between individual things. And also if you have a configuration that you want to move from one machine to another, you can go and back those up and restore them as well. So just by using the backup and restore buttons, it will take the entire configuration for everything that you have relating to Visage from this machine. So if you're getting a new server in place, you can just back up that configuration and put a base Visage installation on the new machine, restore the configuration, and you've got the whole setup exactly duplicated from one to the other. So it makes provisioning the things nice and easy. And the error server, remember how I said if you had the mailer in place, you could actually have those emails coming through. This name of Visage here for the error server corresponds to the name that we had over here for our mail server. You can give these any names you want. The name isn't that important, really. It's more what it does. Okay, so that's the management console in a nutshell. Questions on that?
Yes, but
No, well,
you've got all day.
If I had a web server where we've got people from all over the world maybe connecting to it, is it possible for me to have so many lines allocated to them, but still 1 or 2 lines allocated
yes.
for internal use?
Yep, oh no, absolutely. That's what you do in terms of setting up, because the people coming internally would be going to a different URL than the people externally.
Okay.
Right, so from that management thing, we'd actually have 2 template servers set up, one for the external, one for the internal, even though they may actually physically be mapped to exactly the same spot and getting the same templates and so forth out. They present via the web server as 2 different URLs.
Yep.
And then the URLs are the things that tie into the actual line. So people from the outside world, you might have 2 or 3 or 5, and internally you might have 5, 10 or 20, because obviously your internal users, you want to maximise their performance capabilities. External, that's the internet, people are used to waiting. So, no, it's as simple as that.
With the nail telnet
Ports, yep.
yeah, we will have a fair amount of work to do with the distrib package.
Right.
Because they use the port number in setting up a table for doing different things.
When we discussed that in the past, I thought the different things were things like terminal characteristics and so
yes,
forth.
Yeah, so
unnecessary.
And the more we think about it, the less reliance we would have on this requirement.
That's right.
As we modify.
Yep. There's stuff coming through.
Yeah, what you might find though is that you have programs that, I don't know, select a holder record to build a temporary file where it suffixes, say, the port number to the key or something like that, and then comes back and then produces a report from that based on the port number. They might be the more the sort of instances that you have problems with, you know what I mean?
It's going to be something that's application specific. There are ways around it, and I'm about to show you a way or an alternative you can actually do to do that. So in some respects you could actually keep things exactly the way they are. You might have to modify one line of code, but you can actually tie an individual to effectively a specific port if you wanted to, or an individual device. Just so you can see the Visage shortcut I have here, the front of it is exactly the same. The difference is on the very end. Remember before I had WL Visage.hta, question mark vconfig. The ordinary Visage one just doesn't have the question mark vconfig on it. Right. Exactly the same. Now these things are also set up when you install Visage on the machine. They'll be set up on the menus as well. We cheated with this one, so it's not. So do as we do, don't do as we say, don't do as we do. Which is why we also don't have the nice little eye logo on it. Normally I have a logo. I'll show you this one. So normally I have nice little eye logos on the things as well, which is what our standard logo looks like. But you can have whatever logo you want, brand it to your own satisfaction.
Specifications.
Yeah, just develop your own icon, and then right-click properties, change the icon, and put whatever you want on it. Okay, so into Visage itself. Now at this point in time, remember how I was talking about that change of HTTP acceleration and so forth? This is the message that someone will get. Right, so it's seen there's been a change in acceleration, a new session will automatically be restarted. So there's no guessing as to why did that suddenly do a double take. It's just a case of click OK, it closes, it shuts, and away it goes. Now, at that point in time, little progress bars and so forth, what's physically happening behind the scenes is there's conversation taking place. Part of that conversation is I'm hitting a URL. Okay, what machine are you? This is my machine ID. Are you logged on at the moment? In this case, the response came back, yes, you're already logged on, so there's no need to log on again. Right? I know that I'm already logged on because lo and behold, down the bottom here, I had some other processes already open. Now I'll just go and shut these down. These are ones I was playing with on the weekend, so we won't worry about those. Shutting sessions down and so forth, you can use the X button. You can use the exit button. It doesn't really matter how they shut down. I know that's bad news coming from a terminal emulation environment, like you don't use the X.
Log off before you...
Yeah, that's it. Actually, I'll just call Task Manager up. I believe I have some processes here. Okay. At the moment, I have some rogue processes running on this particular machine. These rogue processes will present themselves in Explorer as mshta.exe in Task Manager. This thing has got 42 meg of RAM allocated to it at the moment, and there's no screen associated with it down the bottom. Right? So I can't get in and change it. The way to blow it off is Task Manager, right click, stop, and away you go. But a better way, or something I prepared earlier to demonstrate this, if you get in as the main Visage user, I'll show you how to do that next. Under administration, you have a thing for active user management, right? This is sort of the equivalent of list users or a list U type command for Visage, right? So in terms of active users at the moment, here are the people that are physically on. So there are 4 people on this website URL internally. So we have Marjorie. If we click on her, we'll see over here she has 2 sessions going at the moment. She's using vMenu and vDictMain. One of the things with Visage, a workstation can have multiple sessions open simultaneously. Unlike your Telnet type thing, they don't they count as users, but we don't bother counting them. So a user can have as many screens open as they like, and there is no penalty associated with that. So she's got 2. Shane has got a few more. We can click on any of these sessions. The sessions are sort of like a PIB number, if you will. It's just the way that each individual screen session that's running is identified uniquely inside the environment. As we click on each of these individually, down the bottom we'll actually see any item locks that any of those processes physically have. So if they've actually got some records locked, here's the files, so vMenu and WL process, same item. So I'm guessing that he's actually going and doing some development. Now you can go and kill a session individually by clicking the kill button, which I'm not going to do, otherwise a gentleman by the name of Shane Farrell will come across and be really, really upset. And as he's just through the other side of that door, it won't take him long. So if we go on to someone like me, we'll see that I've got 2 menu things open. Currently one was on vMenu, the other one vMenu main, no item locks. Now I can kill a session individually by just clicking the kill button, or if I do the click all, or kill all, sorry, it will kill all of the sessions associated with me as a user. Now what your users will see, if someone does this, is something approximating what you're about to see. So we kill all sessions. Things, the little hourglass down the bottom here is telling me basically what's trying to think. I've never killed myself before, and it's probably never going to come back from that situation. I'll just use Alt F4 to get rid of it. This is what a user would see. Sessions become invalidated and will be terminated. Problem says contact statement. Alright, they can get details as to what happened, and the session became invalid because I whacked it off. Surprise, surprise. Now, important for you to know about some popular, and because the session's gone on close, some popular myths that you would have heard about the internet. Myth number 1 is that you can't have persistent locks with a web-based application. You can't do the equivalent of a read-u. For most environments out there, that's absolutely correct. With Visage, it's wrong. You can issue a real live read-u so that your Visage applications can quite happily coexist with your unmodified green screen programs. Second myth or thing is there is no way for you to be able to tell if someone has just cruised away from your website as opposed to turning their computer off or falling off the end of the internet or something similar. Sort of true, but not quite. From Visage perspective, we can tell the difference between someone hitting the X up in the top right hand corner as opposed to switching their machine off or having a network failure or something similar and they just haven't been seen for a period of time. In both cases you can actually track that event, that they've clicked an X or that they have closed or that they haven't been seen on the internet or seen on the network if we're talking about an internal application. And if you want, you can be kind to the person. By default, what Visage will do, it will clear all the current record locks and get rid of any temporary things that have been done and so forth and just wipe it out. But if you wanted to, that becomes something that you can actually respond to as a message and you can say, oh, they've dropped off the end of the internet. I might be kind and keep a copy of that 15,000 line invoice they were up to line 14,890 on, and next time they log on I'll actually say, hey, just like Word, you know how it comes up and says, well, I had these documents, you were part way through, do you want me to save them? You can actually offer your clients exactly the same thing if you want, because that becomes a trackable event as far as you're concerned. Just consider as to whether it's useful. You could actually do the work, sorry, but it just means that you can grab hold of all those work variables, put them out in a separate file somewhere, and then when they log on you can go and see if there are any things out there for the user. If the user hasn't logged on before, typically you'll be presented with a screen like this that says, give me a username and a password. And you get to control all those things. So I've got very simple ones because I am very simple at heart. In terms of navigating or moving around here, your Windows people can use the tab button to move between fields and shift tab to go back a field at a time. Your people coming from PIC and other environments can use the enter button because they do exactly the same thing as far as we're concerned. When you've got both fields in, you can either A, click on the log on thing with your mouse, B, if you hit enter again or tab, I'm not sure if you actually saw it there, but if you keep your on the log on button at the bottom left, you'll see it gets a little red shadow around it. Likewise, if I go back up to the password field, you'll see it has a blue highlight around it. That's supposed to be a guide in terms of where am I on this particular screen. So what will happen if I hit enter in this case, once that has a highlight on it, it's just the same as if I physically hit the key. The other alternative is you can use a hotkey shortcut for it, which we'll talk about shortly. When you log on, based on who you are and what you're allowed to get access to, you'll be presented with a menu. Something innocuous and yet something important. Individual people can change the way that their menus actually look. They can also have changed whether they're allowed to get into changing the way that they're allowed to look or not, because you might have a corporate standard. Someone has been very nasty and set me up. Now I'm just going to breeze through a lot of the stuff here, so it's covered quite well elsewhere. But basically, we have the notion of entities. They're companies, branches, warehouses, call them what we call a standalone unit somewhere. We also have people. People get to do work in these entities. Entities have profiles associated with them in terms of what they actually have access to, because you might have some areas that can't get access to the general ledger or can't get access to take up new debts, and other areas can, and likewise people have access to that as well. If I just come in and call myself up, now you may recall when I physically logged on initially, it asked me for both a username and a password. I'm just going to change one thing here, and I'm going to put in administrator as the web domain user. Now what will happen there is next time I come in to Visage, part of the conversation that takes place when the bars and so forth are coming up here is, are you logged on to Windows? Yes you are. What's your Windows username? Right, in this case I'm logged on as administrator. It says, hey, I know who you probably are. So I'll plug the username in automatically for you to determine who you should actually be logging on as. You still have to put your password and so forth in. So that if people are using Windows domains in the environment and so forth, you can have half of their security credentials plugged in automatically. You can turn that screen off entirely and have them identified wholly and solely by what their Windows login was, so that you get a thing called single sign-on. So once they're signed on once to their environment, they don't have to worry about signing on again. So users, passwords, language they're using, initial entity that they're logging on to. The most important thing over here is user profiles, in terms of which profiles and which entities I'm allowed to get into. I'll show you where that comes into it shortly. And appearance, buttons to
So can I just ask,
absolutely.
The sign-on, if you're going to a screensaver and you go away from the desk,
You've got to go into the Windows screensaver passwordy type thing first, but it will still then ask you to sign up. Sorry, from Visage, no. If Windows goes into its screensaver mode and you've got a password on that, all you have to do is kick Windows off. There isn't a screensave or auto log off thing or something similar from within Visage. So someone could be logged into a Visage screen for 5 days, not log off, even though they've had to call their screensaver or call their system out of the screensaver half a dozen times over those 5 days.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And in terms of like leaving your desk and leaving your terminal up like that, if they don't have a screensaver and there's nothing that anyone can come and
Anyone can come and use it the same as they could right now, unless they lock their workstation. Right, Control-Alt-Delete and just lock the workstation would be the way to do it, or physically close the sessions down.
Yeah. So, but if they don't do that and they forget to, there's no automatic thing where it just after 10 minutes it goes down and
No.
you have to.
No, if you wanted to put that in, you can, because you can put your own timers and so forth in. You can also get it so that going into every process, you actually have to put your password in again. That's a real pain. But it's horses for courses, I suppose, in terms
whatever
of
people want, and
Yep.
depending what department you're in,
what security type stuff
Yeah.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
because typically if you're in an actual application, and if that's something you wanted to have everywhere, so to speak, you just get your own little routine where you set a thing called a timer, and that timer can be reset whenever there is a conversation going back to the back-end database. In other words, something was done. And when it counts down, what you can actually do is exactly the same as I did with the kill all type thing before. You can get it to go and destroy all sessions from that particular workstation, maybe keeping a copy of them in the first place, or you could simply get it to pop up with your own log-on type thing to stop them from being able to go ahead. That's right. Because once more, because we've got the full power of Internet Explorer, even though if you look at the screen it doesn't actually look a great deal like Internet Explorer at the moment, but at the end of the day that's all MSHTA is. It's just a different container that's housing the browser itself. Now what I wanted to show you here was in terms of the menus and menu types and so forth, what some people prefer is things like the tree menu, which is that style of thing. Others prefer a horizontal, sort of your poppy out Windows style menu. You can have things then in terms of whether it pops out whenever you click on it or just run your mouse over it. Whilst that's there, because that's what Windows does, I would suggest if you're going to run that, you select only for click, right? Otherwise it becomes really, really painful. There's user interface type things also in terms of the navigation bars and so forth. Just showing you around the screen here, so to speak. You'll see on the bottom of this screen I've got some buttons on the bottom. That's what we call the action bar. They're always going to be on the bottom, and exit's always going to be the one over on the extreme right, and save is always going to be the one over on the extreme left. Unless you or your users say, no, I'm Chinese, I prefer to have my exit on the left and save on the right and so forth. And you can just go to one's place and change where those buttons normally physically appear. The area over here on the left is what we call the navigation bar. That's where you physically navigate through menus or navigate through if you have a process that has multiple screens and so forth with it. Up on the top we have a toolbar, so that's where you can see the toolbar, and you can turn those things on and off. We also have a thing called a zoom bar. That's that little select style box up here. It's this thing. So the way that works is I can be in the middle of a program and go and do something else. So if I wanted to have a look at, a process, I can type in its name or part of its name. As I type, it's actually what they call a combo box. So as you type in, it will try and guess what's actually behind it. We have a look at the drop down. We've got all of my standard Visage programs here. It's made a good guess. That is the process I wanted. So if I hit enter at this point in time, it will spawn off a new window for me and take me directly into that particular process. But what I can also do, or the alternate for that, is that little checkbox there seems innocuous enough. If you look over here on the left-hand side, keep your eyes there. If I go and do the same thing, what will happen is once more we'll be taken to vProcess maintenance again, which is where we define processes. But I've got two what I call bang bars over here on the left-hand side, very reminiscent of Exchange or Outlook. Right, so when I click on the top one, which is my user maintenance, that's where I started from. The other thing is popped down to the bottom. I can get back to that by just clicking on it. I can get to wherever I want from here. So as a user, I can actually select whether when I go to other processes, do I want them within the one window, in which case I can navigate through them with the bang bar, or do I want to open up separate windows and do your normal Windows navigation in terms of just alt-tabbing between them. right? So the user has some control over that. You also can control it when you start or spawn a process off for a user. You can actually go and get it to either open up as a brand new window or open up as one of these bang bar type things, as we call them. Right, these can be closed individually because they're running as a separate session in their own right. They are stacked though. If I come up to the very top level here for my user maintenance and exit from this, I'll just save that with that different navigation style. So I exit from that one, even though I hadn't specifically exited from process maintenance, this will actually just bring me back out to the menu. The change to your style doesn't happen immediately, right? It will happen next time you log on. So in this case, the X button there. There we go. So next time I come in, I will get the copy-outing menus, and I physically have to click on one of these before they will open. As I said, you can have it, but trust me, it sends most people crazy unless they have an accurate mouse or a slow mouse. I found a slow mouse works best with that menu. You got a question?
Can you change the branding of that navigation pane?
Over here on the left,
Yeah.
what, in terms of where it says Visage?
Well, can you have it so it doesn't say Visage, it says your company name or something like that?
You mean
and
you mean something like, I don't know, something like that, where it's a totally different colour with your own.
Okay, and so you've got 3 different systems: development, test, and live.
Yep.
You can have them all different colours and everything, so it's really obvious.
That's what I
It's
do.
red if you're in the live one. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I do.
With flashing lights.
You have a number of branding opportunities,
Okay.
right? One is this icon up in the top left-hand corner. That's the company identifier, so to speak.
Okay.
Now you can actually, from within the menus themselves, if you're at a menu, to change entities, accounts, branches, divisions, however you actually have your stuff set up, you can just right-click on that and you will then get a list of all of the entities that you're allowed to get into. So if I come across to this VSafe area, I get a different colour scheme again, but it's sort of in there. If I go back into my main Visage designer type area, I will get a different colour scheme as well. Okay, so yes, you can make those as visually distinct as you like, to make sure that you don't accidentally start developing in the live area. But you can also do that by only having the development tools. We generally only have the development tools in the one physical area. But they can also be on separate machines. So that's one branding opportunity, so to speak. The other one is this little icon over here. At the moment it's one of our logo type things, our save time and money and normal activities type stuff, which is why it's half clock, half dollar sign type thing. This is an area that most people don't click, but if you do, left click it, what you'll do is come up with some details about the actual process you are running at the moment, the screen you're in, your session ID, your machine ID. This uniquely identifies, in this case, my notebook. Right, so before we were talking about process identification and so forth, you could actually have a file somewhere that says machine ID of Ross at whatever it happens to be really corresponds to process 4, and it is always 4. So that then regardless of where my notebook is or which session it's coming in on, that becomes a constant that you can use. Or you can change your routines to actually use that machine ID. We use that in things like point of sale, for example, so that we can uniquely identify a till. So it becomes a constant. Process ID is just the server thread that I got last time out in the back end. So the last time this was served up, that was the communication that went through the web server, who I'm logged on to Visage as, the entity I'm in, the application, language English, and the version of Visage I'm in. As a developer, if you twist my arm, I'll then show you how to use things like the debugger. Right, because you can have your application going and you need to know what the magic password is, which I will tell you before you leave. But you put the magic password in and then you get a whole new set of windows in terms of things that you can do. So you can show information that's being sent from the client to the server. You can show information that's being sent back from the database. You can disable error handling, probably not the smartest thing in the world to do, but if you've got an error there, you can go do it as a one-off if that's what you want to do. You can create a log of everything that's actually on the screen. The HTML content is there at the moment, so that can be sent through. You can go and execute a script. This is an actual JavaScript script at this point in time, so I can do things like VRE for my Visage runtime environment, alert, hello, actually just put that in single quotes, and through the wonders of technology when I go and run that, I get a little hello. But I can actually send messages down to the back-end database using that thing. I can go and interrogate variables that are actually on my physical page at this point in time. Right? So it's sort of like an interactive debugger where you can go and do anything you want out in JavaScript land without having to have said beforehand, hey, I need to put debug statements or something in similar. So if someone has a process that at this point it's bombing out, right, you can get to that point, call the debugger up and start to check variables and so forth, do the next thing. You can also do the thing called the runtime debugger. And what that does, it starts a little window up here. And what that window will do is absolutely everything that takes place gets logged in that window. So there's what it did in terms of the routines. You were talking before, Craig, about how timings and so forth. So that particular thing took 375 milliseconds for the receive of data. It took another half a second to get the debug type thing in, and so on and so forth. So now every time you do stuff, it will get logged up in this window. So I can actually keep that window there while I go through the programs and do things, and you get to see exactly what's happening behind the scenes in terms of conversations. Remember that graphic we had originally that showed information running backwards and forwards? This is actually showing what's being sent down, what's being sent back.
So if you run something that gives you classic, non-numeric data or variable not assigned message.
On the back end D3 side of things,
yep.
This probably isn't going to help you for that, because this is, once more, I'm talking about the client side here. You will get that message coming up, and we'll actually create some of those shortly.
Yep.
But then it's physically just going, this is more for if that has happened and you want to send some different values down, or just check what's actually going on. Am I getting the response back from the back-end database that I expected?
Okay.
Right, so that's all it is. So it has some very powerful debugging type things available for you to play with. You can also set logging levels back on the back-end database as well. There are variables that you can check. You can actually write your program so they will write information out. There's a variable that you can actually check, a thing called WLDebug, and based on its number, write some information out. Visage itself has these things internally as well, so if you want to actually check to see what's happening, you can set the debug level up, and different programs, depending on how high that number is, will start to log various pieces of information. If you set the level up to 10, there is a file called the vSession file, and it will actually show you every individual call that was taken when you do something, so you can see the actual process diving into every program in the back end of Visage. But you can also do that to have debugging built into your programs that normally doesn't take place, but if you are trying to track down a problem, put the number up to whatever the magic number is that you required, and that information will then start getting written out. Right. But it tends to be one of those things, if you only think of that after you've had the problem, not before. So, because we've had some interesting things that we try and track down in Visage, that's why we have the stuff intrinsically throughout it. And we'll check that. So that's just a useful little bits and piece. Okay. Visage talks about things called systems. What a system is, I will let you decide. But it's one of the basic constructs that we physically have. It's the bottom line building block. For us, we have systems like VR, which is the Visage runtime. We also have things for us called GL, which is our general ledger system. It's really just a way of taking a segment of your application and saying these things are notionally associated or attached somehow to the application itself. A lot of people, and you might fall in this one, Craig, just have one system for everything that you actually have. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just if it makes sense for you to be able to identify things based on a system in terms of debtors as opposed to creditors as opposed to general ledger or whatever, then you can set systems up to identify things along those lines if you want. A system, the primary thing that it has is just a code, description, a full description, a feature set. These are things that you can turn on or off in terms of behaviours and so forth. As you were starting off now, don't worry about it, right? But we have all sorts of backwards compatibility flags and so forth in there for people, so that even though they're running on version 7.2, they can go and set the thing so it runs like it did back at 7.14 or 6.3 or something similar. And there are just features you can turn on or off. But as you're starting your journey now, forget about that. That's basically it in terms of a system. Systems become important, or more important, when we come to files, right? Where a file, one of the things that it is uniquely tied to is a system. Right, so that in terms of searching and so forth, I'll just show you some more generic things in terms of the environment. And this is just stuff that you get. We've talked about the blue highlight, we've talked about how you can hit enter or alt-tab and so forth. You'll see that some of these processes have little underscores on them, and you've probably seen this if you've used Windows programs before, so you know that if I hold down Alt and M, for example, it will take me to the accelerator that's underscored. Right now your programs probably have numbers alongside them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and people can get to things with numbers. Here, each field can have an accelerator alongside it, so just Alt-T will take me to title, Alt-F will take me to the file type and so forth. When you are developing your screens, and more importantly when you're developing your dictionaries, you can actually specify what these accelerators are. So as you drop things onto a screen, they'll come through automatically, but you can override them individually. Other things that are useful to note or be aware of, I suppose. If we have something like so the search screen here, you'll see that depending, if you keep your eyes on these three buttons up the top, as I go into different fields, they will either be on or off. Right, they're context sensitive in terms of what they're doing. You'll also see that my cursor is hanging there, and it comes with a little bubble help over it. If I move it down here, it says a maintenance process here. This applies default to the dictionary. When you click on the field, that same little bubble help is also down the bottom line. Right. The buttons up here, although the backwards and forwards look like backwards and forwards page in Internet Explorer, they are actually database navigation here. So forward takes you one record forward, back takes you one record back. It allows you to go and put in processes that are part of a process, move forward, and you will find the next value. You can also use a search query, which will typically come up and ask you something about what you're physically after. So in this case, I might be after something to do with accounts receivable and a maintenance process. We have used a standard naming convention with our processes as we actually develop things. First two characters indicate the system: accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger. Most systems tend to have two letters in them, followed by another letter which is M for maintenance, or T for transaction, R for a report, E for an inquiry, which is something into America, in which case it needs to be an I. Things along those lines. But you don't have to do that. There's nothing preset with it. But the advantage becomes obvious here, where I'm after a maintenance process for accounts receivable and I don't know what it's called, but I know that every maintenance process in accounts receivable starts with ARM something. So I can just put that in, ordinary pick wildcard, square bracket, click the search, and there I have my 19 maintenance processes. Right, pick the one that I'm after and away you go. So thinking ahead, it sort of makes life easier. Also from the users, they don't necessarily know the actual thing. When you think about it, most systems are, devolved down into maintenance, transactions, reports, inquiries, and special stuff. And that way you can end up with the same sort of consistent menus across everywhere. So that your accounts receivable maintenance routine is probably called ARM menu. Your accounts payable inquiry screen is APE menu, with all the discrete processes under there. But it also makes it nice when you come to things like the drop down, because all of the things are actually grouped together. Probably not so much there because there aren't that many in Visage, but if you start and get out to something like our core application type area, we've got quite a few. So having the things grouped together here makes life a whole lot easier in terms of finding out broadly or exactly what you're actually after.
Can you generically export those out to Excel or something like that?
Right.
Look at them.
Okay, let's jump here. Let's say, no you can't, and then I'll show you how to do it. Okay, those things would actually typically live, in a process, right, so, actually not on screens, we'll actually go on application. Process definition. Process name, don't know. If I just click search here and put in no criteria whatsoever, it'll take a wee while. I haven't done this for a while, so I'm not sure how long it's actually going to take. But what it will do now is go and select the entire file. Now what I'm actually doing here is I've got absolutely everything. This is a facility that isn't widely available yet, but it's something we're working on in terms of tables having the scroll bar type stuff. Any table anywhere in the system, right, that you develop, you can, providing you don't turn the facility off, right, but tables generally, and of course this one has had the facility turned off. Don't you love it? Okay. Generally you can right click on a table and you have an option to export the data out to a text file or Excel, and that's any table anywhere, unless, as has happened here, someone physically go and turn the thing off. Very useful if you've got things like lists of transactions or lists of, I think transactions, in your case it could be debts and conversations and so forth, and just without doing any programming whatsoever, just to be able to go and say right click, export to Excel. I'll show you.
So your table's like a file list, no?
No, a table is just something that you're presenting on the screen. But if I, as an example, and I take this as a verbatim type thing, so if I go and do a debtor inquiry for this guy, and this is using our application, so yours will be somewhat different when you get around to actually developing it. But a table is just this presentation thing on the screen of just having
Transactions.
in this case transactions. There is a thing when we have a look at developing, you'll see you can drop a table onto a screen. Now when you have these tables on there, you can click on any of these things and have things sorted. So if you wanted them sorted by outstanding amount, just sort of sort either way, and that's a left click, unless you're left-handed, in which case it'd be a right click. But if you right click, assuming you're right-handed, you have this option to export data. Right, so if I pick my C drive and a file called ross.txt and say I want to export it out to Excel and say okay, because I'm not on my PC, I'm not even sure if this thing has Excel on it. There you go. So let me go back to my machine where I know I have Excel. Well, anyway, I
Yeah.
probably don't need to do it.
With
It's just,
the
it will actually open up Excel and it will be populated with all the data from that particular table.
Yeah.
So that would be the way that you would actually do that. And it's great in terms of it's free. As in, you don't have to do any special program or anything to be able to achieve that. It's just there. Yeah, well, that's right. And it's relevant in terms of it's what I'm actually looking at this point in time. Anyway,
So if people collected data on Excel, it could easily be
On the
put
other
up
one.
in, say, another site or whatever, and they've got, say, coming into this system and they've collected all their data from Excel, you'd be able to input it and get it.
there is a generic import routine that allows you to take stuff in from an Excel spreadsheet. The spreadsheet has to be laid out in a particular way, and we'll come to that imminently. Back to the files. So if we look at our TT customers file, the files are associated with the system. It's just a way of grouping things together, right? And that's the only purpose it really serves. Description. Basic program type file. You can just go and say that it's design MV basic, multi-value basic, compiled content, and that simply is a flag to this process and to say, okay, when I ship that out, I only ship the compiled code, I don't take the physical source. So, as I said, for the time being, just leave it blank. You can refine those later on as your skill increases over time, or familiarity. At this point, you also get to define things like a search, a maintenance, and an inquiry facility. I'll just show you how this hangs together, and I'm just going to flick back between things that we've already done. We have a file on our real system, which is actually called AI Customers.
Let's see if Visage is one case sensitive, either, is it?
You can set
You
it
can
up
set
now.
that becomes your choice.
Your choice.
Right, if you're talking D3 is automatically not case sensitive, and there's actually one of the option flags that you can set to go and set up the sensitivity and so forth.
that
You don't
distributes.
want
No, distributes.
But you can also define, as we'll have a look next to next, on the dictionaries, you can actually have fields automatically converted to uppercase and so forth as well. If you have a file, when you define a file, there are three things that you may want to do on that file. You might want to search to go and find, in this case, customers. You might want to do the maintenance. You might want to do the inquiry facility for it. Where that translates to generally is when you are in a process of some description and you drop one of these things down, you've got a right click here, and lo and behold, the top three buttons are search, maintain and inquire. Now that will just be there automatically. So if you have defined a customer file and you've said, here's my search process, here's my maintenance process, here's my inquiry process, then the fact that you have a dictionary that refers to that file, like this is a delivery customer or something similar, and the file has the names of the processes that are used to do the maintenance, the inquiry, the searching and so forth, it just means that without you doing anything, clients, your customers, your end users will be able to right-click and go to the appropriate maintenance screen, or right-click and go to the appropriate inquiry screen. Or if you have something specific for them, you can come to this one place, change the reference on the file itself, and then use that site-specific maintenance process, or site-specific inquiry and so forth. So
So
that's,
you could change inquiry to lookup, or As you say, it's just what it's
That's right.
in your.
The database itself. Okay, if you're creating brand new files, you simply nominate the files as being normal database files with a modulo for the dictionary and the data, and that's it. It will go and create the files for you. If you're working with a pre-existing application, as 4 of you are, these files probably already exist out in other accounts, right? So what you do is you have a file name that Visage uses. Now, some things that you have to know or be aware of with Visage, because we're using Windows. In Windows, if you've ever done any programming or looked at any of the codes and so forth, you'll see that there are things in Windows and they have lots of dots in them. And whereas in the multi-value environment, dot is just another character, in Windows, dots are important. They're things that separate properties or methods, or that they actually have significance. So we tend not to use dots at all in file names and dictionary names and so forth. So you might have a file currently called customer.file. The Visage name for it is going to have to be different. Right. Once more, we tend to prefix our files on the Visage side of things with our 2-character system code so that all the files come out together. Even so, my file name here is AR Customers, even though 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever, we actually just called the file Customers. So to point the file to a Q pointer, all you do is nominate what the actual underlying file name really is. Now, some stuff we haven't looked at, it's already set up and there's a whole day in it, so I'm not going to go to it, but we already know which account that customer's file is actually in because of the system that the file is actually in, because the systems are associated with physical accounts. Craig, you're lucky because you didn't have a legacy system you're starting with. The system you're working with just grew up from within Visage, so any new files that you create, once more you just say they're normal database files. Don't worry about the stuff over here on the right about the Q pointers and so forth, and the files that you create will just be created in your normal area. End of story. The related files here is useful primarily from a design perspective. In our case, we have a number of files which have and share a common key. Right, so we have our main customer file, which is keyed on customers. We have a file of open transactions, which is also keyed on customers. Customers' balances, notations, indexes, old indexes, order entry transactions and so forth. All of these things share exactly the same key. Now, that will become important later on, as you'll see, because by setting it up here and basically saying these things have got the same key, it means that I can quickly get across to any of those other files to suck information out from them, right? Because we know that if we've got the key to the customer file, we know how to go out and read the balances. Or conversely, if we've got the balances file, we know how to get to the customers, and from the customers we know how to get to outstanding orders or whatever else it happens to be. So related files in this case corresponds to files that have exactly the same key. But you can also do things in terms of relationship. Does this related file, does the record already exist over there? Now it might, which is what we tend to have. It may exist, because if you've had no transactions, you may not have anything over there. You can say, yes, it definitely must exist. Now you would have that on, say, my notation file for a customer, where the related file of customers, you're saying the customer must already exist. So by doing that, you're not going to be able to store a notation in the system unless there's already a customer there. It sort of makes sense. But you can also say it must not exist. And I don't know if you have situations where you can have information on this file or this one, but not both. They can't have the same key. So if you need to have that thing of unique keys, like I can use something providing the code hasn't been used on any of these other files, then you can set that relationship up as well. And this is just done at the file. So here are files that are keyed alike, and this is the relationship between those files and the file that I'm actually working on. What you can also do, any of you familiar with triggers at all? Database triggers. Doesn't matter if you are or aren't. You can still use all the facilities in the underlying database. Right? They're there, and you can set native file triggers on files to go and do stuff, typically when you're reading them, or when you're deleting or writing information and so forth. Visage also allows you to do the same type of thing. And basically what you can do here is say, hook in a routine for whenever you read information from this file. One or more routines. The on update is before you update the record. It's already going to happen, but it's a case of before you actually do the updates, you can go and run additional code. On update is after we've updated the record. You can go and run additional code. And what happens if the update is aborted for some reason? So, someone clicked the X button or the cancel button or something similar. Now, where these could be useful for is, let's say you have an employee file and only certain people are allowed to go and see the employee file, or particular employees. Or a customer might say, no, I want to limit who can have a look at certain customers and so forth. Option 1, go and write change 50,000 programs everywhere to go and do that. Option 2 is link in a subroutine here that says when you go and read a record, run this piece of code to go and apply the special rules that need to be applied in terms of, am I allowed to look at this customer, do certain fields get blanked out, whatever it happens to be. Change it once and automatically throughout the system, whenever you read a record, that piece of code is actually going to be taken. Whenever you delete a record, before or after. So it just means that you can centralise those changes. It becomes completely visible that whenever I read a record, this is what physically takes place. There's actually another way that we can do that thing in terms of who gets to see what information. That's what we call a filter. I'll show you that shortly. That's 2/3 of what there is associated with a file. The third, the buttons over here on the left, by the way, that's the navigation type thing. As I click on each of these, I will call up a totally different page. The page that we haven't looked at are associations. And associations are multi-valued sets of data within our file itself. By and large, this is maintained automatically for you, but you do need to come and do some maintenance on it. Right? And I'll show you how and where in our very next thing. Just be aware that we have this thing called multi-valued associations. Right? And what it does at the file level, it keeps track of all of the fields over here on the left-hand side, the association members, that are actually in this multi-valued set. And that simply means by knowing all the things that are multi-valued together, like we're talking about an invoice line, let's say, to know that the quantity and the price and the discount and the rest of it, here's all the things that are multi-valued. That just means that in an environment, when you say, I want to add a new line or I want to delete this line out, we know which multi-values to go and add or suck out and so forth. But what it also gives you the ability of is, in terms of the grouping and so forth as well, you can actually have routines automatically fired whenever you go and add multi-values and so forth. We'll use things, so I wouldn't worry about it, but it's possible to do that sort of stuff. I'll show you a better file of that later on. Yes.
Ross, is that like the C and the D within the
Yes,
dictionary?
it is exactly the C's and the D's. It's one of those things that people tended not to do in multi-value. The C was the controlling attribute, the thing that you typically do the decount of all the multi-values and so forth. The D were the dependent type variables. Okay, let's look at dictionaries. And I'll go and look at our TT customer file, which is rather simple and so forth. We've got to have dictionary items for all of these things in place. Once more, the actual names of the dictionary items need to not have dots and so forth in it. If you are pointing at a pre-existing file, so Visage knows nothing about it, you can say I want to create a new dictionary item and put that pre-existing dictionary item name in for the item code here. We'll go and read the pre-existing dictionary. We will change the name for you. The rules we use a thing called camelback notation. Now what camelback is, well, actually there's a couple of different names for it.
What was that?
And they have two rows instead of one.
No, it's more a case of where you would normally have.
I had to put
Okay, well,
That's up to date.
let's test your.
I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning.
Okay, if you woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, you'll be right. Let's test your camel trivia. Right? We have two sorts of camels.
Camel spit?
No. We have two types of camels. Some have got one hump, some have got two humps.
That's true.
Okay. Tell me the name of both. Most people know the one with one hump. Anyone?
Camel.
The type of camel? Or?
The type of camel. Different between. There you go. Well, that's your challenge. Oh, you actually expected me to know. One hump is a dromedary, two hump is a bactrim. Most people know, a lot of people know the one hump being the...
What's the two hump?
Bactrim.
Bactrim.
Bactrim. Anyway, camelback is this type of thing, where you would normally have full stops, we use lowercase type stuff and an uppercase letter where there normally would have been a full stop to the left of it. You don't have to do that, you can still keep using your uppercase names if that's what you want. It's really a case of whatever is convenient. We've adopted this standard ourselves, but you don't have to physically do that if you don't want. In terms of the dictionaries, I cannot stress this enough. Spend your time getting the dictionaries right. Every hour you spend getting your dictionaries right is going to save you hours in terms of development and so forth. Because once more, what we're trying to do is lift as much logic, as much things as we can out of our code and put them into either the file or the dictionary where they're visible and everyone can see where they are. So no, don't take shortcuts. No, for your dictionaries, if you want in your applications to have a little floating bubble help like that, go and enter up a tooltip on your dictionary when you're actually doing it. Don't do what we've done. Actually, I've cheated. I've picked a field that's a display state. No one actually enters it, so it's not going to be on the screen. But put the tooltip in when you're doing a dictionary, because you're going to have every good intention of coming back later on and putting that tooltip in. And I guarantee I can visit you in 2 years' time and you still won't have found time. You'll never find time to do it later. It's just the nature of programming. Do it up front. Right, and then it's going to make life easier for you and your operators. Your operators will like the fact that they can have their cursor hovering over a field and get some help. Or if they physically go into a field, on the bottom line down here, they can actually see just as a simple one-liner, what I'm supposed to be doing. If they want more information, and one of the things that you have generally, let's have a look at, say, tooltip, I'll get focus on that, click my little help button, and we have our hourglass. I don't know what people are doing out in the back. Unfortunately, I'm running off the web server as well. You'll see I've hit 100% CPU, so not a good sign.
While we're waiting,
Yep.
with the dictionary there, does Strib have defined them as A1, A2, A3, A4 as the attributes?
Yep.
Is that what we would use?
I wouldn't. Well, if you're used to and familiar, and everyone is used to the ideas of A1, A2, A3, A4, by all means keep them.
Yeah, but
If it was me, I would use a more meaningful name like customer, address line 1, state.
All about
so there doesn't have to be any
simplifying.
link between the dictionary item in the...
Existing names and your names can be streets
Yeah.
apart. Right?
As long as it's referring to the same attribute within
Yeah.
the... Yeah, great.
Okay. I'll come back to my help thing because I don't know what's happened there as to why...
It's so hard working on when you start on a Strib site, isn't it? Because all the programs like D100...
It's just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at the program names as well, you know what I mean? And you've got no idea what they are, but as you say, yours have got...
Well, yes, but once more you need to look at your existing users and so forth. If they know what a D100 is, right, then you probably want to keep it as D100, maybe, because if you suddenly go and change things like that,
But when you're starting to add
if
to
you're
it...
doing brand new ones, I would suggest using a more usable name.
You'll have synonyms or something.
Yeah.
Look, it comes down to hindsight's this wonderful thing. my hindsight tends to be 25-25. It's better than 20-20. But when you're actually in there, one of the biggest things that you need to consider in terms of developing your applications and so forth is what to do in terms of things like names and
setting up rules. Yeah, we've got
whatever the rules are. That's why I'm telling you what the rules are that we've used in
Yeah.
terms of naming files and dictionaries and so forth, because
which is good.
they work for us and hopefully they're going to work for you as well. But it's just one of those things of it. No, you don't have to do that. If you have rules that you're happy with at the moment, keep them. But A1, A2, A3, the next time you get a new developer coming in, he's going to scratch his head and say, what is A1, A2, A3,
Exactly, yeah.
as opposed to customer name, customer phone number.
But where you've got the tag,
Yeah.
right, that would break.
Oh, the tag.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the nice long wordy description that.
But
you
the
physically
A1,
have. Yep.
if we use that would be what the dictionary would be referred to as
Yeah.
A1.
The dictionary stuff will still physically be there. Just
Like if you did a list of dicks in facades,
yes.
right, you would see A1.
We don't actually use the.
That, but would that be what sort of the relationship? No, it's got no relationship at all in that respect.
Okay. Someone's doing something out there with the web server at the moment in terms of worker threads. And even then it didn't come up to where I actually expected. But the help itself is actually context sensitive. It's just ridiculously slow because of the worker threads at the moment. The help system, because I'm in the Visage environment, will also have help for the server-side libraries, which are subroutines as far as you're concerned, things that you can actually go and call. I might go and call some people to see who's doing what there, because that's just... I wanted to install an upgrade this morning, I said, not today. I hope that message got out to the appropriate people. It may not have. But, okay, I'll just leave that. I'll be back in a second. I'm going to go and kick some blood.
So the company you guys are with did that used to be HF Go?
We've got our own company,
Okay,
but all our clients use the strip,
okay.
and they are looking at sort of getting green and GUI screens,
Okay, beautiful.
and not all the screens, but some of them.
Yep.
So our plans are to convert those over with
course.
Visage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. Bulk data entry screens probably don't need to be because they're so fast on text-based, but
That's right.
all those screens that you
Sales.
hardly ever use, and
Well,
salespeople.
inquiry,
Yeah.
stock and that sort of, so you could build up a very nice one screen Visage that would probably link 3 or 4 of the older strip.
The decision support
That's it, yeah. And then once you've got that, then you've got the reporting facilities for management, you've got emailing, you've got faxing.
Yeah.
It just, it brings it up to the 21st century.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's stage one.
I did work for Jeff Penny.
Oh yeah, down at where he was, that's right, yeah. Yes, I did a little bit of work many years ago for him.
Okay.
But he also had Artline at Silverwater.
That's right.
Yeah, and I did a bit of work there as well.
Well, that's their main
Server
product.
itself.
Yeah. And remember going in his place, he had all those plates.
I never
Didn't
went over his
Yeah,
way.
never.
I worked for George Penny, I think it was, his
Did
son.
you? Oh,
Yeah,
right.
his son was the IT manager.
Right.
And Reg Barber was the general manager. I just did a bit of work here and there for them.
So you know the strip.
I know. When they say, oh look, can you change it so the cost of goods sales transaction or whatever it is goes up the general ledger like this, and you think, okay, I've never seen a strip before. You jump in and just finding it, because there are all these codes like D100, D200,
Yeah,
A1,
yeah.
A2, A3.
It goes around the world.
Oh my god, yeah. You got these programs, D100 calls D101, D102, D103 with no indication of what A3 is.
But at least they have a standard. Oh,
But
Yes.
yeah,
sure.
once you knew what it was.
They were related by name or something sort of.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the help system, now that I've killed those rogue processes, as you can see my processing speed is down to 0. Basically what you have is all the subroutines that we provide you that you can actually call from your own code are defined in here. So there's all sorts of things. If you want to do a graph, that's how you do a graph. So nice and easy. So if you want to have a screen with a nice little bar chart on it, just sort of load your data up and away you go.
No, you don't even do that. You just call it.
So good.
Well, you can, but just be aware, if you highlight that and go Control-C to copy, it doesn't work. You need to highlight it, right-click, and copy. Then paste. There is trick. Everywhere else, not a problem. Just in the help system. In terms of the client side things, once more, there are a whole stack of functions, as they're called, out in the web space type thing, out in terms of JavaScript and so on, of things that you can actually go and call. Unless sandwiches, pizza.
No. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
No,
Sandwiches sounds great.
thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, so hours and hours and hours of fun and enjoyment there of just routines you can call to go and disable fields, for example. So if you want to have something still on screen but not have data entered to it, just call it as disabled. If you want to physically hide a field because you don't want it on the screen, it's often a case of if it's not there, people won't ask about it. So just go and call it to go and hide it. Once more, all of these routines you can do from the client or the server into things, and a lot of it's just done from the server. If you're this type of customer or this type of user, here are the fields that you don't see. What you're probably better off doing when you design your screen is have them hidden in the first place. So if you're this type of user, show the fields. Right? Just that way you don't actually see them flash off, so to speak. So in terms of design tip, I suppose, in terms of screens, if you are going to be manipulating the fields to be on or off, have them off first, because that way everyone will see them off and the people that should see them on will see them suddenly become visible, as opposed to see them suddenly disappear and then say, why can't I do-" That's right.
So often what you have we have a status thing, and depending on the status that you select, it shows different fields. The problem is though that you can't tab from one to the next, so it might be just the way they've sort of set it up or something.
I'd say so. By the way, if anyone wants coffee,
just
tea, we'll just go and put it.
Does anyone want water over?
Scotch and all that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it came from. See the item name there,
Yep.
right?
That's the dictionary name. So if I said list dict of AR customers,
Yeah.
that's what I would
Okay.
actually say.
If I said list dict to customers,
On your distribute system, it's going to say A1, A2.
yeah,
That's
right.
right. So
Yes.
if you still wanted to call them A1, A2, A3,
Yeah.
from the Visage side, you would
No,
put in a thing of A1.
Yeah. It would be, and it would be to our advantage.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because it means
Yeah.
that when you look at a variable,
Yeah.
you
It's
know
got
what
some-
it is.
You know what it is.
It's got some significance. Yeah.
That's right.
What
The
doing is
intrinsic
all about.
Yeah.
intrinsic value to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise
And as Ross says, to get it right here, it's part of it
It
is
flows
us
through
to establish a
absolutely
set of
everywhere.
procedures.
That's
it
right.
takes time. You've got to put the time in
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Good.
So your A1 type thing
Yeah.
would have an attribute of 1 at this field, but yeah, the actual item name would be whatever it
We'll
is.
change
The
it.
tag corresponds to, see how above each of the fields have actually got a question or a field tag type thing? That's what it is. It's just physically the default tag that's going to display on the screen. When we get to actually design an application or write some stuff, we're just going to drag and drop, and that tag will be there by default. You can change it if you need to, but the question then becomes, if we're going to change it, why wasn't it what I needed in the first place back on the dictionary, right? So always have that double take in terms of why much. Now sometimes you need to because you're putting it in the table and you can't have a description that's a tag that's 50 characters long for a field that's only 1.
But that's interesting. I know we're getting down to nitty gritty, sort of customer and name, right? Product name. You know what I mean? Like
yes,
sort of
keep the same things. I tend to use code, like something that's key to a file. If it's just a single part key, I'll just call it code.
Instead of saying product code, you just say code. That's quite sufficient, really.
Well, it's obvious because up in the top here we can see what the actual file name is anyway.
Okay,
So
It all corresponds
with
to
me,
the
I'm just
file
sort of
name.
looking at design
so
concepts.
name is name is name
Yeah.
is name is name is probably description apart from customers.
No,
Because for most other things apart from customers and suppliers, it's description. It is the status of description.
Yeah.
These salesman name is probably a bad choice, but yes, even in terms of the nomenclature that you use for the same things across multiple files, once more, if you're coming through regenerating something that's been there forever, now is the time to actually get some consistency there. And Craig, if you're creating new files corresponding to what the other guys have done, and if you're using the same type of field, adopt the same sort of name, just to keep things nice and consistent.
Because we do actually have a legacy system
Right.
on the other side of the business, which is the debt collecting side. And so, I'm working for this new business, but I think they've inherited the original software to start with.
Yeah.
And so exactly the same sort of problem we have.
But we've started to put too much into the description. Yeah.
I assume when you actually refer to these fields, like if you've got, description as being, field one virtually in every entity file.
Yep.
When you refer to it in code, it's going to be, file name dot description or something.
No, not dot, underscore.
Right. Okay.
But we'll have a look at that imminently. I'm just gone across to a different file here to show you some things which I have set up, which are potentially useful. Okay. I've got a thing here called total tax. It's an actual attribute out on a file. It's an invoice file in this case. Now, total tax is its item name, its tag is that thing over there. The accelerator is G. Right? So it's actually going to have the underscore under the G for goods, so to speak. Please try and pick an accelerator that's actually in the tag. Now, I know you're laughing.
It's been done before.
I know you're laughing, but yeah, it has been done before. Now, obviously, you are going to come to the points. There's only 26 letters, right? So you are going to have multiple fields with notionally the same accelerator. But if you then picture ahead, so to speak, some of these fields are not likely to be on the same thing, on the same screen at the same time. So that allows you to do the overlaps and so forth. And also, at the end of the day, tough. It's 2 or 3 keystrokes they've got to do rather than just one. And if they're upset with that, they can always just use a mouse and go straight to the field as well, right? Because they're there as a convenience only. Okay, the association name. These are a drop down. It's maintained automatically. These are the multi-valued pieces of information that I physically have. So back out here, I've got a number of multi-valued sets of data on my invoices in this case. I have a whole lot of stuff relating to special charges. I have a whole lot of stuff relating to serial numbers that are being sold. I have a whole lot of things relating to products, because each product has got extensions and line and override reasons and so on and so forth. So all the things that are multi-valued together should have the same association name tied to them, right? And make the name somewhat meaningful. We're talking about invoice lines, call them lines. Don't do what we did, call them products. Well, actually, there's reasons for it. Never mind. So just make that a meaningful name. So everything that is multi-valued together, put in. If you have sub-multi-values in your data, don't worry about it. Just put them in their own association. If you have sub-multi-values, just put them in their own named association. The reason I wanted to have this one specifically, though, was in terms of your field types. See how the field up here is blue background and so forth? See how these things are drop-downs? That's the field type to a certain extent. How is this normally presented on the screen? Is it going to be a text box, a select box, a checkbox, a text area, a display field, which are the blue background type things? Is it going to be a password, so that what they type in gets hidden? Is it going to be an image, right, as a physical picture? Now, because your immediate thing is going to be, we can't store pictures in the database. You're right, you can't store pictures in the database, but we can save paths to images. And when you find out that you don't have to write any code whatsoever to enable people to capture images, then if you're doing things like a goods receipt note or a receiving document or something, or an original debt notification or whatever, and if you want to add image capabilities, you simply have a field there, you say this is an image type, and when you drop it on your form, you have a little checkbox that says allow auto acquire, and that just means that people can update it. So if they have a scanner, or if you have the thing as a file, they can go and capture it. Simple.
So are you saying that you could have a PDF document and just drag it over your form and it'll attach it to
You've
that
got to point to it rather than drag it. It'd be a browse type thing.
Right,
What
okay.
I'm saying is you could have your your workstation device with a scanner attached to it, and you could actually scan the image, of whatever the piece of paper was, and capture that directly into the application.
Yeah.
So it can take it directly from a scanner, or it can take it from a file that's a pre-scanned type thing.
Okay. And it will store it on the server.
It stores it out in what I call web space, which is out on the Windows side of the thing. Now that might physically map back to a Unix machine or something similar, but the actual image is stored out, not in the database. All the database keeps is just a path to it,
Okay.
right? And that's it, basically.
Well,
Yes.
so if you like, say it was at the supermarket or it was a till,
Yep.
and it had images,
Yep.
is that the same sort of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
So the touch screen,
Touchscreen.
like if you've got like a visual
Yeah.
place, you just put all those images, and they're stored on the ether out there.
Yeah.
And
Well, they're physically stored at a place that your web server knows about.
Yep.
So typically they're out in Windows type stuff. Like once more, you can have those. Like what we have as an example. If I just open up another session.
I mean, Woolies is a good example.
Yeah.
Because Woolies have that.
They have
Come up with
Every
what
time that they put something in,
You get the
just
picture of
everything
the...
comes up.
Picture,
Bananas
price,
or tomatoes or
Yeah.
weight,
So I'm going to say one of the things that we've done for our e-commerce system as an example is for every product we allow up to 3 image sizes, a little thumbnail type thing, a medium sized picture and a full size picture. And that's just something we keep for every product that's out there, plus links to technical documents and so forth. So yeah, if you wanted to design your application so that every time they put a product number in you saw a picture on the screen, that's fine. But I'll take you back to that original discussion we had about bandwidth, right? Because those images are probably, depending on their resolution and so forth, they could be anywhere from 50 to 150 to K or 3 megabytes, right? So you just need to be careful about what you're doing. You also need to be aware of where they're going to be used. If you're going to have an image and if it's displayed on the screen, most screens operate at a resolution of 96 dpi, so it doesn't make sense to have a 300 dpi image because you're sending out 3 times as much detail as you actually need. But if you were going to use that image as a logo on a report that you were going to produce, then having it as 600 or 1200 dpi makes sense because you want that to be as crisp and clear as you possibly can. So you just need to think about where the image is going to physically be used.
Could you store the image on their machine?
Out on the client, well, once more, because it's cached, remember the caching options we had, one of them was to cache images, so first time it's referenced, it's pulled
So
back
it's
from
there.
the web server, and after that,
Right.
it's physically cached.
Gotcha. So it's on.
So something that would be really useful for us, we have people go into these screens to look up a phone number, then they make a phone call to say, hey, where's our documentation, whatever it is. And all of those phone calls are recorded.
Yep.
It would be really nice to be able to click and say dial and dial the phone, actually record the conversation and have that automatically saved back against the you know, the...
Well, that's a case of having a PABX that has a dialer associated with it.
Yep.
You then, like, it's beyond the scope of this, but the dialer could either be driven from, well, actually it depends on what they're actually using to dial. Because if they were,
Well, I would suggest...
I was going to say, if it was void things, if they were using something like Skype, then you have an API for that, which actually has recorders and so forth in it, so you could automate that entire process if you wanted to.
Yeah.
If you, it's a case of, you know, the limitation becomes one of the equipment, and depending on what you're doing, it may be something that's driven from the client device or something that's driven from the server, or sometimes it's something that's driven as a middleware module type thing as well. But certainly that's something that you could physically do.
Okay.
As a customer service record type thing. So back to where we're at. So that was the help, and that was, we'll come back to the dictionaries here somewhere. Dictionary, that's where we're up to with dictionaries. Okay, so this particular thing is a display field. Other things we had was a composer box, a radio group, a media viewer, and a button. So it just depends on what the thing wants to be. Once more, you can have rich media as part of your applications. So if you wanted to have a video of, you know, this is how we use this particular device, or you might develop a help desk application, that, you know, or it might just be, this is how you use our program, here's our help text, hit the play media button and you actually see a presentation like this come up. So you know, if you want to include that rich media type experience in the application, it's fine. And once more, it's the physical media is stored out in web space, right, where the web server can access it. The only thing that's stored back on your database is just a pointer out to it. That isn't strictly true. You could store it back in the database, but you don't want to do it because you just want to be able to pass off that work to the web server so your database connection is back as quick as it can. And you know, the web servers are optimised for delivering that sort of media and so forth to it. Data type, you're used to this sort of stuff. This is MR2, it's 2 decimal places, you know, 0, 1. You have alphabetic, which are alphas only, alphanumeric, numbers and letters. No spaces though. If you want spaces, the field has to be defined as full ASCII. You can have them as dates. You can extend these yourself. I have no idea what a JW data type is. It's something that someone physically developed. So if there is particular maskings that you want for credit cards or debt numbers or phone numbers or something, if that's something that you're going to use many times over, you can actually define your own data type for this. Justification, length, pattern. What are the valid answers for this particular thing? The pattern is used primarily or often for things like a checkbox. Right? Because on screen you want this to say, you know, be checked or unchecked, but behind the scenes you might want that to be yes or no. Right? So the question then is, well, how do I map a tick to be yes or no? And the answer is, if that was what we were physically wanting to do, then this would be a checkbox. Right? The data type would be full ASCII. The pattern would be yes, no. Just like that. Yes is checked, no is unchecked. So depending on whether we check or uncheck the thing on the screen will give us a yes or no back when we actually look at the field. Simple. Likewise, things like radio groups, where you've got a number of different buttons. Each radio group just has associated with it, you know, one or more characters. So when you select this is what we physically get out. Correlatives, just like your ordinary dictionaries now. If you need to do some special processing as correlatives, you can put that in place. The output conversion, you can put that in place, although it's defined somewhat by the data type and so forth you put in there. But if you manually put something in here, it's going to override what's actually there. Default, right? If this was a date field, for example, if we wanted this to default to today when we're coming in, so if we're doing an invoice, we want it to be for today, the way you do that is just like that. Just equals and whatever it happens to be. If you wanted this to default to a value that had been somewhere else on the particular file, or somewhere that's related to this particular thing, you just put in the reference to it. So if we wanted this to default to, and this is a dumb example, but discount. for example, then in our default column over here, we simply say equals file name underscore field name, and it will just automatically default to whatever was in that particular file. Help. Help. The help button. Right, if you want to have context-sensitive help associated with this field, whenever you drop this field on a program anywhere, this is simply the file that has that help in it. You go and maintain it by either going out and remembering the name and so forth, or just right-click and go to maintain. Before I go to maintain, I'm going to talk about one of the field types that we had up here, and it's a thing called a composer. This is not a musician. Just get that out in the open. What a composer box actually is this thing on the bottom of the screen here. Right? Your word processor in a box. Right? So change that. Bold, change fonts. Symbol is always nice to see what it actually comes up as. Change font size. All of those capabilities that you would typically associate, well not all of them, but a lot of the capabilities you would associate with Word and so forth. By simply saying that a field is a composer field, this is the way that it's presented on the screen. So full control over fonts and sizes and bolding and underlining and all of those sorts of things. Do not use this if you are going to be writing an application that is updated by Visage, and also your green screen application, because when your green screen application looks at your nice composer box stuff, you're going to get all sorts of junk up on the screen. But if you're designing something fresh, new, crisp, and if you want your users to be able to put in delivery instructions, say at the bottom of an invoice, and be able to highlight things and bold and have things in red or something similar, fine, go do it. Right? Just simply define the field as being a composer field. That's it. Or you could sort of figure out how to write a mini word processor yourself. Personally, I find it much easier to say, this is a composer field. Look, made it magic. Right? And once more, you can go and define, insert images and all those sorts of things in the middle of your document and so forth as well. So, extremely useful. But the real thing that you would use this for, of course, in this sense, is to go and enter up your online help. Right, so...
Does it have a spell check on it?
No. Coming real soon, but not yet.
Good.
Yeah. We keep on agonising over this because we know the dictionary we want to use, but it's 40 meg.
Right.
So we're looking at ways of maybe being able to use the Word dictionary, but there are some licensing constraints associated with that. I think the guys at BCS actually have a server-based spell check thing that they've put in place.
Well, they want it.
Yeah.
They want it because everything's abbreviations.
Yes.
CST might be customer, and I mean you have these huge summaries of a conversation written down, and there's all these three-letter acronyms for everything, but different people use slightly different ones and things like that. So
Well, the real solution for that, and also back to your recording and so forth, is, and this is a no added cost bonus, Visage has inbuilt voice recognition.
Is it for a limited time?
No, it's not for a limited time. Well, actually it is. It's for as long as Microsoft included.
Okay.
Because as Visage is Internet Explorer is one of the first applications that Microsoft enabled voice integration with. So I remember about 8 years ago running a demonstration for some people who had had a demonstration from a competitor who had made the fatal mistake of running pick down. Oh, that old hat technology, da-da-da-da-da. I said, oh, right, okay, so they can do this on the microphone, and I spoke my order into the system. They showed you that? Oh, they can't do that. Oh, right. And we've got the old technology. Right. Back then we used a third-party product to actually have the 30 discs of Kurzweil in there if anyone wants, but now voice recognition is built into Windows, right? Certainly with Vista, it's okay in XP, it comes as a standard thing with Office 2003, and it's just a case of, it's not on this thing, but it's back over here on my real machine. You just click your little microphone thing down the bottom to activate it, and hey presto. You've got to put the time in terms of training and so forth, but that could be an alternative to your typing the stuff in. They can actually speak it in, and it's going to be spelled correctly and consistently as well. Because each workstation is then trained for an individual user.
Yeah, I think we've actually got to find a way of getting the summary like that in, but actually getting scanned images of all the documents. You imagine we buy 40,000 bets. The paperwork for each one is like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you imagine what the office is like. And,
Scanning's sophisticated, and if they're PDFs, you just associate them.
And we're owned by an American company, so they've got all this Sarbanes, Oxley, compliance.
SOX
and all that
compliance
stuff.
is great and fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's okay. We do similar things over in our VSafe, for example, where people have got safety certificates and so forth, so they just scan them in, and someone needs to prove that they've actually got the welding certificate. There it is. Email it out to them. Away you go. Piece of code.
So this is the help on the dictionary at the moment.
This is help on the dictionary on it, but it can also be help on the program and so on. You have to, it can be anything. Help is help. Help is whatever is behind this button. In terms of a help ID, it's a case of what regular naming convention are you going to use? You can use any damn thing you want. You know what I'd suggest you use? If it was me, I would suggest a really good name for a help attribute like total tax on the OE invoices file would be OE invoices _ total tax. Call me silly.
Well, silly.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we've been setting that one up for a while.
There you go,
I was going to say, this needless to say is my business partner, Chris Griffiths.
Oh, I think call me silly too. Coffee, teas, Coke?
I have another Coke.
Coke, yeah.
Beautiful.
The sugar one or the sugarless?
Absolutely. Fat Coke.
All right. Water?
Not skinny
Water.
Now why I say that is that we've got documentation on the system now.
Yep.
And it's referenced by the program number.
Program name, same deal.
Right?
Yep.
And having done that, it's in a file within D3.
Yep. Just cut and paste.
Okay. But what we're intending to do, or what we have done for one of the clients, has moved into Word and then used Accuterm to display the HTML version. So that sort of linkage at this stage not there.
Out to Word.
Yeah, like we couldn't use a Word document as part of our help.
No. What you do is take the Word document, put it into our help system. Unless you wanted to write your own hot link into the help thing itself. Right, which you can do, because once more, physically, when we called up the help stuff here before, we had I might have closed it. We had a reasonable sized document physically sitting there. Now that document here, you can actually export this. Like you can take it the other way and use this to produce a hard copy manual, and put that out in a Word and so forth if you wanted to. But if you wanted to use Word itself, because then Word would have to have the hot links in it, the references to be able to jump directly into it. But no, the help system at the moment is its own standalone little thing.
Yeah, but we having said that, within our subroutine, we could do exactly what we're doing now, calling a path through Accuterm.
Well, you wouldn't have to though. Sorry.
To go into...
To the Visage help?
No. For what we've got now,
Oh,
could we have that link into...
If you have a thing now that fires off Word and goes to the appropriate document, yes, you could do exactly the same thing.
We could.
Yes, you just need to
Play
rewrite
with that. Yep.
how that physically works. But it also means that you're then locked into using that
All through. No, we wouldn't want to
into
do
the
that.
future.
No.
Okay.
Anyway,
Unless
we can
you
talk
smart
about
in terms of the
we can talk about that.
The main reason I wanted to come to this dictionary item in the first place was for this little thing here. Even though this is a physical attribute out of the file, it's actually made up by adding a number of multi-values together. And in particular, the line items were line tags. So you probably do the same thing now in terms of the dictionary, in terms of if you have a dictionary that needs to add together a whole stack of multi-values to come up with the result. This is how you do those sums from a D3 perspective. So you can add into there as many fields as you actually need to come up with your answer. You can negate those if you want, and that's it. The system will just automatically do the math and so forth for you. So if you want to map a calculation out to a real attribute, just set the sum up for it and it'll happen. So that as you're adding your lines onto the invoice and so forth, it will automatically tick over and do the right sorts of things for you.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what we're after.
In terms of validations, if I pick something different here, like a product code. So in terms of validations, I'm working off my invoices file. Basically what I have is my validation file name is IN products. In other words, whatever you put into the product field must exist on the products file. Pretty simple, straightforward. You put that on the dictionary, then any product code that you enter must exist on the products file. You can validate against as many files as you like. Right, so it might also, this is ridiculous of course, but you could also say it has to be on the AR customers. But as well as saying must exist, you can say may exist or must not exist. In other words, you can say, you can put something in here,
If it's
has to exist over here and maybe here, definitely can't exist over on this other file. So you can do those multiple validations in one pass for got to be out on these files, definitely can't be out on those files. Right now you may have code to do that sort of stuff. Unchanged. Basically what happens here is, at my dictionary, what I'm saying is, whenever my product code changes, go and call this routine, right, in any program. Now this particular routine, subroutine, function as we call it, goes and runs this little sucker. Now I'm going to scare people. This is a subroutine. What you can do for your subroutines, as well as its little shorty name that you call OE.pricing, you can also have a full description for it, right, of a one line, but more importantly what you should do here, not what we actually do, but what you should do is put in a full description of what this routine does. Right now you probably have this as documentation at the top of the program and so forth. You can keep it there if you want, but here it becomes visible. We also keep track of, that you manually need to update, any other subroutines that this particular thing calls. So if we have a program, we're dumping it out, and this program calls OE pricing because it's referenced my invoicing file, and then in turn we now know that we've got to take the latest current up-to-date version of the price lookup program. Pretty simple stuff, but documentation. Parameters. Gosh, this subroutine, holy, it actually takes in up to 25 parameters. So it's not one that you would normally want to put in by yourself, but each parameter, right, so we're talking about in the brackets here, you define exactly what is going in before you finally get to the source code. In terms of, and this is really horrible stuff, so don't look at this.
Don't do this at
Don't do this at home, right? But this is our core pricing routine, used everywhere, and it's 108 lines of code. But in terms of the editor, it's syntax highlighting and so forth, and those sorts of things. From here, you can go and compile the routine just by clicking the compile button, which is why I said to you earlier, Craig, you don't have to worry about the compile verb and so forth. You just develop the stuff in here, and it'll go and compile and so forth for you. Other noteworthy thing, if you were using D3, we use flash compiled code. We'll automatically flash it. We do that to get every ounce of speed out. There are some worried looks here. We know about flash compiling as opposed to ordinary compiling.
Let's see.
It's faster.
Like a WinZip.
Faster. No, it's not WinZip. It's more
Just
of a speed up type thing. Yeah. No, it's not compression. It just makes programs run faster. Now, how fast depends on what the program actually does. Let me give you a demonstration, if you don't mind, just a real quick one. So if we have a little program here, if I said okay, reasonably straightforward. Just let me compile that normally. Because we have ours set up so it automatically produces the Flash-based compile stuff. But for things like string manipulation and so forth, having your program Flash compile will make it run between 10 and 15 times faster. Right, so I have known software houses in the past who offer their clients upgrades, performance upgrades, based around simply Flash compiling code. Right, these people said, but we don't have access to our source code. That's okay. The performance increase that we're putting in place, we don't need access to your source code. Because you don't need source code to Flash compile things. Why doesn't they do it by default?
Yeah.
Because the debugging facilities aren't quite as good in the flashed version. But in terms of speed, like, it's chalk and cheese.
It converts it to C, doesn't it?
It used to, not anymore.
No?
No, it's straightforward.
With the cross-referencing on Visage,
How do you make cross-referencing?
you know, the D3 cross-referencing in D3,
Yes.
but wasn't there a problem, not a problem, but a situation there with Flash? There's not.
There are problems with D3 and T. They're just generic problems with D3 and T.
Right.
It's a dog, so to speak. Anyway, the bottom line of all of this, I suppose, is simply that you can, at the dictionary level, say, whenever this happens, go and run this program, which can, in this case, puts the products in, goes and presets up price tables and so forth, so we can then have those acting as defaults later on. Likewise, you can indicate whether the field is mandatory or not. So if the field is mandatory, then you can't write the record away unless it actually has data in it. Now, what will happen with that as well, if I go and have a look at one that we compared earlier with the correct name, of course. I have order entry on the brain. Gah! Fourth time lucky. Okay. ARM customers. I'm sure it's customers. I should, and this is why people should use the menus. The shortcut key sounds really good, but it's not really. Nothing there. Actually, okay. We've got a couple of fields here, like the home entity, which for us is a mandatory field. In this case, it comes out as being red. When the entry actually goes in, it turns off. So it's nothing major, but once more, it's just a visual cue out to the operator that we need something on this particular field. It's something that happens without you having to do any programming, providing on the dictionary you've said this is a mandatory type field. It also means that you don't get crap data in, because if you've said, no, these half dozen fields are mandatory. You cannot save a record through Visage unless you actually have values in those mandatory fields. So it's just a way of cleansing the data. Some things are nice to have, and others definitely must have, and that's simply controlled by the mandatory. If Alan says that key fields must be uppercase, then at the dictionary level you say key fields are uppercase, and we'll just automatically convert everything in that field to be uppercase, or automatically convert as lower, or if you leave it as blank, then that's exactly what will be. Now, we have over on the dictionary a length field here, right? And this is the length that you have right now in D3, notional length for a field. What we also have here though is the ability to type and type and type. Like, one of the big benefits of multi-value has always been variable length fields, and you've never been able to do it. You can by default now. But there are times when you don't want people to be able to put things in, because if they do that, it's going to stuff up all of your old legacy reports and do things like that. So if you want to set an absolute maximum length over on the validations tab of the dictionary, you nominate the maximum length. Right? Simple as that. It may seem a little bit redundant, but it's because by default we actually play to the strengths of the multi-value database. People say to us, how big can your customer codes be? And our response is, how big would you like them to be? Is this big enough? Right? Hey presto. Mine's bigger than yours. You can also set up, if things are ranged and so forth, you can set greater than and less than type stuff in the dictionary. You can nominate fields that are used for searching, maintenance and inquiry. Now you may recall this particular field was validated in the first place. If these were left blank down here, then it will automatically get whatever was specified out on the file. For some reason, someone has decided to override these to say, this is the search screen I want to use when I'm looking up products from within this process or from this file. So we actually want to override the standard search facilities. Right? So you can do that at the dictionary level, but we can also do it at the actual process level as well, to say individually within a process. So here's generically the search routine that we use, or the maintenance, or the inquiry routine, but you can have it different per file if you want, and even different per individual process if that's the fine-grained control that you want to do. Likewise, there are routines you can call at the dictionary level whenever this thing is actually validated as well. So whenever it validates here, go and run these other routines. It's a case of whatever the problem is, you go and do that. You can also have standard pieces of code that are run before and after when someone makes changes to the delivery instructions, they don't need to get back to the database straight away. So you don't, in that case, don't have the synchronous field checked. And all that will happen is we keep track of the fact that, yeah, there's delivery instructions there, and next time we go back to the database, we'll send that information down, but there's no reason to do anything special in that case. Fields that are validated against the database will by default be synchronous. Right, but all of the other fields by default will not. But you can also override that because sometimes it might be a salesman field, and you don't need to go out to the database because you're presenting your salesman as a checkbox or as a drop-down select list and so forth, which is populated as soon as you go in, so you can turn the synchronicity off, so to speak. But from the key thing, I suppose, here from your point of view, you don't have to worry about passing values or passing things from the client to the back end or the back end out to the client and so forth. We already take care of that plumbing. And if you change a variable on the back end database that should change things out on the screen, it will change things out on the screen. That will just happen automatically without you having to do anything. Dictionaries, spend time, get them right. Every 5 minutes you spend getting the dictionary right, flagging things as being mandatory, getting the right data types, linking in routines that, when this changed on this file, we need to go and set this up because, heck, it's invoicing. Whenever I've got a product, I've got to go and look up pricing and so forth. But you reference that from multiple places, set it in. Set it once, set it in concrete, and everyone knows that, that's right, when we go and put a product in here, it's validated on the IN products file, we go and run these other subroutines, it just happens. Questions on dictionaries? Questions generally? There's food there, please eat. I won't. I'll keep talking, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, please dig in.
I just need to make a phone call.
Yep, you can make a phone call.
I'll just get this over.
Sorry, no, you can't do that.
So bottles.
If we could just have a short...
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just